In part 2 of our Westbay adventure.
It's totally overpriced. It's no good for motorhomes. Yeah, we saw all the 1-star reviews.
If you're slightly heavy footed, it makes it a bit more interesting.
But I definitely think I could live in Lyme Regis. I love it. Charmouth Road car park, yet another car park that doesn't like motorhomes longer than 6 metres. Ah, what design!
Sammy is loving his off-lead zoomies.
Here is Daz playing Louisa Musgrove.
And Daz talks about downsizing Stampy in Escape in the Motorhome.
Good luck, Bee, sticking this together. Well, I'm out here in Stampy just about to give him a little spring clean as we put our plans together for the year. However, while I'm out here, I thought I'd also clear up any doubt over our plans for this year. So we've hinted at it in videos in the past that, well, things have changed and maybe our needs have changed and what we want to do has changed. So I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a catch up to where we are.
Hold that thought, Daz. We'll get back to you in a minute.
We're in Charmouth Road car park, yet another car park that doesn't like motorhomes longer than 6 metres.
This appears to be a bit of a theme in this part of Dorset, so we made sure we didn't stick out of our parking space before taking our steps down to the sea wall. Here we found the Lyme Regis Beach Defence. This £20 million project involved building this impressive 390 metre sea wall.
So I think we just read that this big path was put into place in 2014. And I can see why it costs all those millions of pounds. It really has secured the coast for hopefully many decades more.
Now the seawall protects 480 homes, streets, pipes and cables from erosion and damage. It was a short, blustery stroll into Lyme Regis, and we were greeted by the incredible Mary Anning rock sculpture by Denise Dutton. I highly recommend visiting the Mary Anning Rocks website, which gives an insight to the statue, its purpose and importance. But the statistic that sat with me was that 85% of statues raised in Great Britain celebrate the achievements of men. In Dorset, there are more statues of animals than of women. This brilliant pioneer of paleontology is cast in bronze, and she's life-size plus a quarter. Mary is holding an ammonite in one hand and a hammer in the other hand, and she's striding out towards the beach with her dog Tray. I love the way the ammonites are wound into every part of this sculpture, from her dress to her dog's ears, down to the path that she's walking on. The Lyme Regis Museum is housed in the building where she lived, and where she scratched out a living selling fossils. Mary was poor, working class and a woman, and despite finding hundreds of marine reptiles, her name was omitted from the specimens. Here is a picture of what her house would have looked like, and the round table for the fossils used to stand in front of the open cellar window, which was a workshop. She uncovered the first ever plesiosaur skeleton fossil, a pterodactyl skeleton, and coprolites, that's fossilised poo. She taught herself geology, anatomy and scientific illustration, and was so skilled she took important scientists with her on her fossil hunts, helping them with their theories. Her fossils are displayed all over the Natural History Museum, and she really was a pioneer in her field. However, women were not allowed to become members of the Geological Society of London, and her finds were often attributed to men. The statue of Mary Anning was finally raised in 2022 after much public campaigning, the enlisting of patrons and donations. On the website you can find details of other prominent women, all deserving of their own statue, because if you're seen, you are known, you are discussed, and you can be an inspiration. The promenade was created in 1771, and in Regency times the resort was known as the Naples of England. I loved the quirky coloured buildings, some Georgian, some arts and crafts, and some thatched. Ammonites are the natural icons of Lyme Regis, where a graveyard of fossils known as the Ammonite Pavement sits at the western end of Monmouth Beach. But it was time to let Sammy have some fun.
We feel there's enough stopping him going to the beach to let him have a quick run over to B at full pelt.
The Cobb, Lyme Regis's harbour wall, was first mentioned in history in 1294, though it probably existed before this. It has also been destroyed or damaged several times over the centuries. And here are those famous protruding stones known as Granny's Teeth. Apparently they feature in Jane Austen's novel Persuasion, though a lot of people think these steps are the ones that were the inspiration. Jane Austen visited Lyme Regis twice in the early 1800s, and her last book, Persuasion, published posthumously over a decade later, features a town called Lyme, a walk to the Cobb and Charmouth.
So I'm not sitting on Granny's Teeth, I'm sitting at some other old stairs. Some people say that Granny's Teeth were the inspiration in Jane Austen's novel Persuasion, but they most probably were built after it was written, and more likely the set of stairs that I'm sitting on now, those are the ones that Louisa Musgrove stumbled down.
One of my favourite things about really old stone steps is the way you can see the hundreds of years of steps taken by all of those lives from the past, the stone being quite literally downtrodden.
Tell me about this bit in Wonka, because you know the film more than me.
Being here, I'm not so sure anymore, but there's a scene where I think the three chocolatier guys are getting rid of Wonka and putting him on a boat.
It was definitely filmed here, anyway.
Yes, sure enough, we found that Love Lyme Regis, shout out to them for letting us use this footage, had some amazing film of several sequences from Wonka being filmed on the Cobb. This webcam footage, which you can find on their YouTube channel, actually features Timothée Chalamet singing. Coming up is the scene that Daz was talking about with the chocolatiers and the crew. And here you can see the Cobb being dusted with fake snow to make it look like wintertime. The magic of cinema.
So a very famous Cobb. Jane Austen's inspiration, Wonka, and of course the French Lieutenant's Woman. I think I'm going to watch that. I don't think I've ever seen it, but I remember my mum liking it with Meryl Streep. Here is Daz playing Louisa Musgrove, and he's going to stumble down the stairs. How was that?
Right, coming down to it more scary.
Yeah. Oh my. There you go. Daredevil. Hero.
It's hard to believe that 30,000 tonnes of French sand and 70,000 tonnes of Isle of Wight shingle were imported in the 1990s to reinforce the coastline. After all that walking and a lot of running from Sammy, a much needed pit stop was in order before we took in some more interesting sights in the town.
I definitely think I could live in Lyme Regis. I love it. Well, back at the motorhome. It looks like Stampy's had a nice view. And I've just spotted an allotment behind him. A little bit out of breath. 114 steps. Fine on the way down. A bit more exertion on the way up. Are you waiting for me, Sam? Poor old Sam, he's knackered. Have we done you in today, Sam? Hi, Sam. And you've been electrocuted. He didn't get that joke. I said you've been electrocuted.
And now's a good time to hear from Daz again.
This summer, I think coming about May, June time, we would have had this motorhome about 3 years now. And 3 years ago, we had smaller boys, we had We had just come out of the back of wanting to move house for a sort of new experience. We almost also bought a smaller house, second house in France, but that didn't happen, and thank God it didn't, because that would have been an absolute disaster. And even moving house, actually, where we picked would have been a disaster, given where their needs have changed, because in that time since then, the demands and the classes for the kids, they're all in a different direction, so that would have been bad too. Honestly, like, cards on the table, buying a motorhome and doing the trips we've done, one of the best things in my life. I think the trip we did round France, the 11-week, 3-month trip round France in 2023 was the best holiday I've ever had, and I hope the kids look back on it with fond memories, even though like one of them broke their arm and there was other stuff happening. Lots too sweaty, too hot, lots of bites. It was actually amazing, and we want those amazing adventures to continue, but we've now got, you know, a 20-year-old, a 15 going on 16-year-old who struggles with the proximity to his brothers in such a small space. And to be fair to him, to spend 3 months around France tripping over a great big dog and his water bowl and making and unmaking beds in the heat, it was difficult. I understand that, and he might not want to share the small space up there that he gets once his two brothers also go up there, so I understand that too. We've also found, although it's handy to have a 6-seater that this motorhome is around, it's quite hard to park, and a lot of the places we've been taking it to, as you would have seen in our trip recently to Dorset, but all over Wales and in certain parts around France, honestly, flashbacks to trying to drive over a lock that was far too small for Stampy and having to reverse back and get everyone out of the way. Those kind of things, being I could sort of do less of those sort of things. And so also in the UK we feel like things aren't particularly motorhome friendly, and this, you know, something this big doesn't fit in a lot of places very easy, unless you want, of course, pay to go on site, which makes the whole joy of it a little bit more expensive.
And we'll return to Daz at the end of the video, where we'll find out the fate of Stampy.
So the boys have done their third and final swim session. I've taken Sammy on a nice morning stroll. A very, very cold Westbay this morning, bright and cold. Now we're going to head into Dorchester. Hello? Ready for an adventure?
Yes.
Right. I know they make me look like a granny, but I do really like my colourful, what do you call these? Glasses? Safekeepers? I don't know, glasses, holders? Who knows? They don't make me look ancient, but they are essential when reading very small text. And at the moment I'm reading this, one of the many books written on the Charles Bravo murder mystery, which I'm finding absolutely fascinating at the moment. I've read about 3 different books over the that have been written over the last couple of decades, which are very fascinating. But yeah, it's certainly piqued my interest, and Victorian poisoning seems to be an area of interest for me. It's funny what you get into, isn't it?
Me and the crazy kids have pulled up in Dorchester in the top of town car park. We're right by the military keep over there behind me, which unfortunately is a museum you can go and see, but not this year because they're redoing the roof and it's taking a long time. So we're parked next to the coaches in these multi-use car parking spaces. I've picked the smallest one just so I don't annoy anybody. And for up to 6 hours it's £9.30, and beyond that it's about £15. And of course, like everywhere else, you can't stay overnight. So top tip is don't come here on a Wednesday, because it's apparently chock full of coaches that even park across some of the car parking spaces. Maybe it's market day or something like that. Anyway, we're off to explore the town.
There are many museums in Dorchester, but some of them do have some dodgy reviews. This one doesn't, the Dorset Museum. Our ticket into the Dorset Museum and Gallery is valid for a year, and it houses exhibitions on natural history and on Dorset author Thomas Hardy, and the excellent People's Gallery. The Victorian ironworks are exhibits themselves. Just look at this fantastic staircase. So in 1856, this Roman mosaic was uncovered underneath the ground of the prison cemetery. They were digging a grave for Martha Brown. She was the last person to be sentenced to death in Dorset. Poor Martha most definitely didn't have a fair trial. She was executed outside Dorchester prison after being convicted of the murder of her husband 35 days earlier. She had attacked him with an axe after he had whipped her. Thomas Hardy, aged 16 at the time, was at the execution, and the hanging of Tess in Tet of the D'Urbervilles reflected his experience of watching Brown's death. The natural history and geology section is great for adults and children, with plenty of interactive exhibits, the story of Mary Anning and copies of The Origin of the Species, including some handwritten notes from Charles Darwin himself. We had fun in the rest of the museum, exploring the different sections, and we went to an excellent temporary Roman exhibition with a very enthusiastic curator. The Hardys exhibition was very poignant, and the kids loved this full-size pin art machine. Not very hygienic though. We decided to go and search for the Maumbury Rings. Unfortunately, the conditions outside were practically Arctic, and that, combined with the busyness of the town, made the whole experience a little bleak.
So we're right in the middle of Maumbury Rings. It's freezing, it's utterly freezing, and it feels quite surreal. Oh, and someone is cutting the grass over there. Of course they are.
Abort, abort, let's get out of here while nobody is having fun. Tomorrow is another day and time for an early morning Westbay visit, our last one, and since returning we've watched Broadchurch, and I'll never look at this stretch of beach the same way. Couldn't resist some raspberry croissants from the local bakery to take back to the beach before we decided to go to Blue Pool on the way home, much against Daz's advice.
I can hear you shouting at the TV screen, why are you going to Blue Pool? It's totally overpriced. It's no good for motorhomes. Yeah, we saw all the one-star reviews. Yeah, aware of that. I had to have sort of, not a pleading conversation with Daz, but I think yesterday, because it was so freezing cold in Dorchester kind of didn't quite hit the mark for me in terms of time. And it just felt really busy and not so nice. I felt a bit glum that some of the places that I wanted to see I wasn't seeing, so I said I haven't been back to Blue Pool since I was a child. Apparently the UK's biggest rope bridge here, which is a new addition, and some nice walkways, some play areas for the kids, and I think after yesterday's disappointment of Dorchester where I had to rush the children back, I feel like we just needed a nice place to go on the way back. If it was the 31st of March onwards, it would be going into high season. See, Sammy just cannot wait to get to Blue Pool. Now, some of the one-star reviews aren't just because it was a bit of a rip-off, and I think that's because of the light show, and some people were paying £60 a pop to go for a 15-minute trail to go and see the light shows over Christmas and Halloween, but it's also because of longer vehicles being caught out by the one-way system and finding that there's a low bridge which isn't suitable for longer, heavier vehicles. We've been reading online all these TripAdvisor reviews, and Blue Pool quite rudely said, you should be going back the way you came. There is a sign, but actually we've just driven in here and the signs aren't that obvious actually, that you need to be going back up the wrong way of the one-way system. We're not in disguise today, we can just park right in the middle.
The first thing that greeted us were these beautiful, huge Art Deco style gates. They were fairly new, and when we saw that it was established in 1935, that styling and the graphic design on all the posters made a lot of sense. Now, these buildings might not look very impressive, but they date from the 1930s and ooze Art Deco and Art Nouveau style, particularly inside, and I loved the relaxing piped music that you could hear.
Shouldn't get excited about toilets, but I do love those old systems.
The 30-foot deep Blue Pool sits in the heart of the Fursbrook estate in the Isle of Purbeck, and after the demise of the hand-quarried clay pit in the 19th century, nature took over and wildlife thrived, making it a site of special scientific interest in 1985.
So I have these childhood memories of Blue Pool, and yeah, just reading some of the history there, I had no idea the significance and the importance of it. And the fact that it was closed in 2020, and it was a lady that had acquired it in the 1940s, and in 2020 she passed away, so the tea rooms and Blue Pool were closed. But it looks like it's had a rebirth, having been bought by a couple of years ago, and they've sort of gone with this lovely Art Deco feel. I'm guessing because of the origins of Blue Pool being opened as a tourist attraction in the 1930s.
When the quarry was abandoned, it filled with rainwater, and the light diffraction caused by those clay particles suspended in the water gives the Blue Pool its wonderful colour. Between the 17th and 19th century, Purbeck ball clay was extracted to craft fine ceramic products, including for Wedgwood. Now the place is a natural haven, and the new owners have done everything to make it a perfect place for families, for walkers, for dogs, and for nature.
This is good fun. No jumping, no dogs. But, you know, if you're slightly heavy-footed, it makes it a bit more interesting.
No need for a bottle of wine. It's just making me feel very wobbly. Apparently UK's longest rope bridge. Drink? You want a drink, don't you? So apparently the blue pool is mentioned in 5 Go Off in a Caravan, and the line is, and a huge blue lake laid out in front of them, glittering in the August sunshine, or something along those lines. Even though it doesn't look particularly blue here, there are some moments when the light is right or the position is right where it just looks the most brilliant azure. Is he pestering you? He just won't leave you alone, will he? Give it a break, mate. Come on. She's seen the dance.
It's time to pass back to Daz so he can tell you all about our next season of van life. But will it be in or out of Stampy?
So what we're looking at doing is, first of all, selling the motorhome. So we've got our motorhome listed on Facebook Marketplace and on Gumtree and on Auto Trader, and we've had some very low offers so far, but hopefully we'll be able to hold out a bit longer. So just in case you didn't realise, Stampy is called Stampy because he was bought with the money that we were going to give the government in stamp duty had we moved. We decided actually we'll sit put and we'll change our view every day with a motorhome. We are still going to change our view because we want to move closer to where the boys are educated and also more historic property. So the sale of Stampy is in part towards stamp duty that we will pay when we move, but also towards a new vehicle. And what we're thinking for that is something smaller, something more of a day weekend type van, perhaps, especially if we're going to take the 2 smalls away. So more of a camper van style thing that maybe can fit under certain barriers, that fits in normal car parking spaces. In supermarkets, that'd be great. Always looking for the overhang is, you know, back in my mind, and I have to kind of Google Street Map everything before we go, otherwise it's panic stations as to where to park, where to turn around, all those sorts of things. We've had, you know, before we had Stampy, we actually did have an old VW T25, a 1983 one, I think, proper old kind of Scooby-Doo one with a high top, and we took that to France on a big journey too. And we're not hung up on VWs, but they do have a lot of kudos and they're pretty cool. But something like that, you know, the tray's expensive too. Something like that, maybe with a pop-top roof so we can stand up, but then also post 2 of our little kids into the roof section. Something with 5, ideally 6 seats. But if we have 6, we don't have a kitchen, maybe. But 5 seats, the 2 in the back, folding down to make a double bed, so that myself and B and Sammy the dog can go away for a weekend, and somebody can maybe come and sit the kids, or the kids can go to the grandparents for a weekend. But we can still enjoy all those kind of little travels that we've been doing. I think for now, the big journeys are off the cards. Ironically, Stampy would have been great for some of the journeys we've been planning. We've been looking at the Netherlands and to Italy. So driving to the Netherlands to some of the fun fairs and the historic stuff there, and maybe Amsterdam. Maybe that wouldn't be so easy with Stampy, but travelling in and accommodation outside, you know, 6-seater, 6-berth. And then Italy. I mean, a lovely, I mean, if we could spend a month in Italy or more, that would be amazing. But even if we just shot across and did some of the north and then went down to Pisa and Rome, Naples, Pompeii, Herculaneum and back up, it would be a joy for me and B, but not for everyone else, and probably not for Sammy, not in the summer. A black dog in around Rome. I imagine he'd cook just like he did in France. If you've got any tips, by the way, for an ideal van, please let us know, because we've done rather well, obviously, with this van, with a nice full-size bathroom, separate shower, place for all of the toothbrushes and toiletries. However, in a camper van, there's a trade-off. You know, we have a nice small pocket-sized van to put into car parking spaces and go under barriers and stealth sleeps at places, but we're going to need some sort of porta potty for midnight wheeze, I imagine. And outside of that, we're going to have to frequent fast food chains, pubs and all sorts, shopping centres, leisure centres, wherever we can. And as I'm saying this, I'm just thinking, this doesn't sound like a lot of fun. But I see camper vans all day long, every day. The only other issue I've seen with camper vans is, unlike Stampy, that we bought with 18,000 miles and currently only has about 31,000 miles on it, so plenty of life left in this vehicle. Some of those camper vans come with 100,000 plus, miles. So they're used, just like we probably would do, is use it as a bit of a daily commute vehicle too, just so that we're not running 3 vehicles and we can downsize to 2. And then there's also the question of whether we buy a panel van and custom convert, or whether we buy something that's been custom converted, and which, there are 1,000 variations out there of, and we could be getting all sorts. Or try and find one that's been professionally converted, but then, it's money. So obviously we'll be scanning the pages of Auto Trader and eBay and Facebook Marketplace, but if you know of any particular groups or websites that are particularly good for used camper vans, then drop it in the comments and we'll check them out. But I have to say, it's a little bit sad. I think B and I are both a bit sad, because I feel like there's so much more potential for this van. It could be that we needed to catch the kids maybe a couple of years earlier, maybe 2, maybe 5 years earlier, and we could have had 3 or 4 really good years out of this, where they'd tolerate the space and each other. We are where we are, and we've got these size kids. So it's a tough decision, but I think it's the right one for us for now. If you're considering getting yourself a 6-berth, 6-belt 2012 motorhome with only 31,000 on the clock, with plenty of life in it, then we'll drop the link to the advert in below. I know with panel van conversions or van conversions into camper vans, it's not necessarily everyone's cup of tea. We're aware of that, and I'm also acutely aware of how much time I've got to give this. So although I feel like it's an option, because we could get the perfect rock and roll bed in the background, we can buy a kitchen pod, drop it in. I've done enough work on Stampy in the past to learn where to place things and where to buy things. Equally, with all the best intentions, I've also seen plenty of listings online where people have bought a vehicle with the intention of doing a camper van and haven't done it, and I don't want to be that guy. I want to be able to either do it as fast as I can within a couple of months so we can take it out, or we're going to buy one that's converted and then we'll have to adapt or convert or fix anything that it comes with. Because I think really for you and for us, the joy is in escapism. It's the joy of seeing somewhere new, of visiting as many places as we can before we pop our clogs. So stick with us, find out what we choose and where we go. It's on with our adventures, but just in a new van.
Well, if you managed to get to the end of that, congratulations, you've reached new levels of tolerance. However, if you actually enjoyed that very long vlog, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing. Until our next escape, whatever that will be in, thanks for watching.